Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Dyer, and welcome to Colorado Inside Out on this Friday, December 21st. Now, the plan all along this week was that we'd embrace all of the seasonal merriment and wear our most fetching and festive holiday sweaters because the big story that was out there we didn't think would materialize quite the way it has this week. We have a lot to talk about, but it's also a few days before Christmas, so we've got our sweaters on, as is tradition here on Colorado Inside Out. Let me welcome our panel. We have Patty Calhoun, founder and editor of Westward, David Kopel, the research director at Independence Institute, along with Eric Sondermann, columnist with Colorado Politics and the Colorado Springs and Denver Gazettes, and Chris Rourke, managing editor at Denver Business Journal. Colorado is back in national headlines with Tuesday's decision by the Colorado Supreme Court that Donald Trump cannot be on the Colorado presidential primary ballot this March. This all has to do with the 14th Amendment's legal challenge that we have talked a lot about on this show, Patty.
Well, it was better than a Christmas card to hear from people around the country about Colorado again. It put us to the forefront. We're on the morning news on every channel. We were in late night television making fun, where you had Jimmy Fallon and Stephen Colbert making fun of how only in Colorado, would you legalize pot and illegalize Donald Trump. So we are definitely back in the news. We will stay in the news because Trump has appealed this to the U.S. Supreme Court. I can't imagine they won't take the case. I mean, this is something that has to be decided, although it was specifically decided on Colorado's law as it affects the 14th Amendment. There are other states waiting in the wings. Michigan's appealed. I think there are a dozen other states that could take this up again. So it is a gift that is going to keep on giving until early 2024, because our primary ballot has to be finished by January 5th. And Donald Trump will stay on it if the Supreme Court has taken up the case but hasn't ruled yet.
Mm-hmm. David?
For the plaintiffs to win, as they did in Colorado Supreme Court, they've got to pull a quadrifecta on four issues. Is the president an officer of the United States, as that term is used in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment? Did his misconduct on January 6th legally constitute engaging in or giving aid and comfort to an insurrection? Is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment self-enforcing, or does it require congressional action? And finally, did the 5-day trial in Colorado District Court, which flagrantly violated Colorado's own laws for how such cases are supposed to proceed, provide sufficient due process? And on that one, Justice Samore, in dissent, one of the three dissenters, said in 33 years in the justice system, he's never seen any kind of trial like this. A key weakness on their case is this is about insurrection, which is a different crime from riot or lots of assault and things like that. And notably, none of the participants in the January 6th crimes have even been charged. But the greatest weakness on the Trump side of the case is, yes, the procedures in the trial court were very regular, but he hasn't pointed to anything that, I wasn't allowed to introduce this evidence, which is exculpatory, or anything else. He hasn't found any way he was specifically harmed by the trial court not considering facts that it should have.
As a matter of law, David's the only attorney on this panel, but as a matter of law, first of all, hats off to both the 4 justices in the majority and the 3 justices in the minority. I think they all acquitted themselves well. I think there was all thoughtful, well-reasoned, detailed opinions. Hats off and credit to all of them. As a matter of law, I have a hard time arguing with their finding. I mean, if what Donald Trump incited and encouraged on January 6th was not an insurrection, what is the definition of that word? And Judge Wallace, the district court judge who heard this case, I thought did a masterful job, even though her ultimate ruling was overturned, in laying the groundwork for why this was an insurrection and detailing all of that. I think Donald Trump masterfully plays the martyr. This just allows him to go back to that role, and he knows that role very well. Ultimately, this is going to be a question of what is anti-democratic. I mean, for many people, January 6th was the ultimate in anti-democratic. But Donald Trump and his people spin and perceive it as this is anti-democratic in terms of keeping him off the ballot.
I saw a headline that said, "No more democracy in the Centennial State."
The fact of the matter is Donald Trump has not been convicted of insurrection. Then we had the Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold, come out and say her office would remain neutral and carry out whatever is decided by the courts. However, she offered her own opinion, and she clearly said that she believes Donald Trump is guilty of insurrection. Well, he's not been convicted of that. That is your opinion. I question whether that's appropriate for, the Secretary of State to be weighing in on. But Donald Trump does have to love this. And even if it isn't playing the martyr, there are people that I know that are not fans of Donald Trump, do not like him, who are now going to vote for him. I think that unifies the Republican Party in a way that we haven't seen. And I think it might even win over some unaffiliateds, not because they like Donald Trump, but don't tell me who I cannot vote for.
Mm-hmm. So the Colorado GOP is saying that it's going to withdraw from or ignore the state's primary if the ruling is that Trump can't be on the ballot, and they'll just deal with a caucus system. Do you think that'll eventually play out, or no? It's just a threat?
I think it's just a threat from Dave Williams. One of my favorite parts, though, about this decision was that they cited Neil Gorsuch back in 2012, so now it will go before Neil Gorsuch in the Supreme Court. And of course, that was a case that Gessler was involved with Secretary of State. So it's a very Colorado case going all the way to the Supremes.
This is not going to be resolved over the holidays before January 5th. And if that appeal is in process, the ruling is still on hold. It's stayed. So his name is going to be on that ballot. Yes, I guess it is theoretical that the court could rule before the actual Super Tuesday on March 5th, and then his votes wouldn't be counted. But I think that's a long shot.
I have to give a shout out to CPR News host Vic Vela, who has a very good feed on Twitter or X, and he posted on Tuesday night, "Boy, you let wolves loose in Colorado for one day and look what happens." Well done, Vic. So, panel, let's talk about how on Monday, Colorado Parks and Wildlife officials and Governor Polis released 5 gray wolves into Grand County, kicking off this reintroduction program. I will start with you, David.
This species of wolf has never naturally existed in Colorado. So all the backpatting is over, restoring Colorado's historic environment. Never true. There was another species of wolf that did live in Colorado, but not this one, which got kidnapped from Oregon and then brought down here. The only natural wolves we've had in Colorado of this species were ones that a small amount that migrated down from Wyoming, and they wreaked havoc. The ability of ranchers to protect their livestock is a joke, really. You can only shoot a wolf. You have to have 2 separate attacks by the same wolf. Then you can get a chronic predator permit, which is valid for 30 days. Besides being extremely harmful to ranchers, this will also be devastating to the rural economy for hunting, guides, outfitters, and all the small businesses that depend on them. The effect of wolf introduction in many of the valleys in Idaho was devastating to the elk herds. So this is absolutely a major new offensive in the war on rural Colorado.
Nothing generates letters and phone calls from wolf advocates quite like us opining against their holier-than-thou interests here. I continue to think, I've said it before, I will say it again, I think this was an unwise move on the part of Colorado voters. I think it was unnecessary. I think it was needlessly provocative, insult to rural and western Colorado. As the crow flies, where we live in Grand County is not all that far from Boulder. It's just over, the Indian Peaks there. Maybe some of these wolves will make that venture, make that journey over the top of the Continental Divide, and then a lot of people's tune will change if all of a sudden you see wolves in the Front Range. As it is morally superior Front Range voters being able to feel good about themselves by inflicting this damage and this harm on ranchers and others in western Colorado.
I read 60% of voters in Grand County said no.
Yeah.
And they're the first ones to get the wolves.
Exactly.
All right,
Well,
Chris.
and really, if you look at the voting stats, it was voters in Denver and Boulder
Right.
that put this. This was a very narrow
Yep.
decision. I think if Proposition 114 were offered today, with all we know now, it would fail miserably. What struck me was the romanticizing of this event, the videos that came out. I'm surprised they didn't put music to the videos. The governor.
Chariots of Fire.
Right. Dun, 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 dun. The governor tweeting about it being a historic day. The wolf sanctuary in Divide coming up with a naming game for these wolves to humanize them. Let me give you some contrast. There is a reporter for the Fence Post named Rachel Gable. She did an amazing article that's on their website right now. She did research on the wolves that were put on the ground here in Colorado that came from Oregon. 2 of the wolves came from a pack called the 5 Points Pack. That has nothing to do with Denver. The 5 Points Pack, and it's a depredation pack. And what that means, depredation is a big word for it, they attack livestock. And there have been 3 separate attacks in 8 months from this pack. Wildlife officials put 4 of the wolves down. We got 2 of the juveniles from that pack. CPW's Jeff Davis told Congress that they were going to make sure problem wolves didn't come to Colorado. We will see if that is the case. Rachel talked about a herd that's near a pack of wolves. They've seen a 28% decrease in conception rates and also impacts to weights on their cattle. This is more than just $15,000 for a lost cow. It has a lot of impacts. We will only know in the coming years how bad this will be. Perhaps we can back up. Perhaps we can make a change. I'm not sure.
Okay, Patty.
Well, I'm not here to be a wolf apologist, but there are a few different dangers you see here. One is, although others disagree with me, I like the citizen initiative process in Colorado. I'm glad, especially as you see what happens with our legislature, which isn't all that representative anymore anyway, that citizens can put forward proposals. Perhaps this one was ill-advised and ill thought out. It's interesting that people were not as organized fighting it as they were fighting HH, for example, because it would have gone down, and I think people have learned a lesson from that. The other thing is, even though voters approved reintroducing wolves, the regulations could still be changed. Even if there wasn't an initiative that overturned it entirely, there were 2 years of stakeholder groups that met to discuss this. So if they made rules, they can be changed if the result is as dire as it is. But in the meantime, I think Colorado voters who voted for it were maybe well-meaning but clueless.
As we wind down the year, Denver is looking to house 1,000 people who are currently living on the streets. And the city is reconfiguring how it is tracking the progress. And then a few days ago, next-door neighbor Aurora reiterated its strategy to lessen the number of those who are homeless, which, Eric, is very different from Denver's.
Indeed it is. First off, we'll know soon enough whether Denver got to the 1,000 figure. My own surmise is, yes, they will get there. Maybe they'll get to 11 or 1,200. That's the good news, and credit to Mike Johnston and his administration for energy and for commitment on this. But I have 2 huge reservations about the whole thing. One is, what does it mean to be housed and how that count works? And a related issue is, and it came out this past week, Kyle, these people are not getting treatment. Until you deal with the underlying issues, which involves treatment and involves more than just a roof over their head and a plank or a bed on which to sleep, you are not dealing with those underlying problems. Hats off quickly to Mike Kaufman and Aurora for at least putting a different model on the table, and let's compare and contrast and discuss.
Well, you were talking about the terminology of what now they're counting. Now it's called moved indoors. It's no longer somebody who's been housed for 2 weeks. They have a category on the dashboard called moved indoors. So there's a change in terminology. There was some fuddling around about the dashboard. Some reporters pointed out that the numbers didn't quite add up. And I think when you have something come up like this where it looks like you've been loose with the numbers or haven't tracked them as well, I don't want to imply anything nefarious, but it takes away from credibility. You also have the Aurora model, like Eric was talking about, so we'll see. I mean, do numbers go down in Aurora, up in Denver? It's all something that we will determine with a point-in-time count in January. It'll be an interesting year ahead, seeing as the numbers change, what moves around, where people go. looking forward
Mayor
to it.
Kaufman said this week that Aurora is a work-first city and stable housing is earned through employment. So that's their tactic. Patty?
Well, work first, but get people off the streets. So really, in Aurora and Denver, they have that in common. If you drove to Channel 12 on Thursday, you saw that there have been sweeps all around here. And those are sweeps, although the city calls them encampment resolutions, those are moving people. They're getting them inside. You have to get them inside in general to offer treatment. So let's hope the Johnston administration starts working on that. It's the same in Aurora. They're cutting down on encampments. They're about to have a stronger urban camping ban, getting people off the streets and getting them to work. That's where you part. I give the Johnston administration credit for at least realizing, although it had to be pointed out to them, that there were significant problems with the dashboard, that the initial 14-day confusion is gone. That's pretty minor compared to the big issue they had originally, which is people were going to go into these micro communities that aren't even going to open until next year. The focus has shifted to motels, hotels, assets that ultimately you hope they can keep recycling as people come in, are off the streets, and you hope get treatment and get work.
I feel like every day you turn on your computer, a different hotel, motel has been purchased by the city of Denver.
Right.
It's very active. David?
The advantage of having diverse local governments is you get natural experiments where you can see how different approaches work. Mayor Johnston in Denver has a very uphill battle because what he's doing, it's called Housing First. That was a strategy that was tried very energetically in San Francisco and Portland and turned out to be a complete failure. Mike Kaufman, long before he was mayor of Aurora, was a Colorado state representative, and he was the lead sponsor on the Colorado bill to implement the welfare reform laws that had been enacted by and signed by President Clinton in 1994. So he's got a lot of expertise on this topic. If you look at the spending, Aurora is spending about $5 or $6 million a year. Denver is spending about $250 million a year. And we'll see who gets better results. To Eric's point about mental health treatment, of the 600 people who've been moved indoors in Denver, only one has voluntarily sought mental health treatment.
One.
During
2023, we've talked a lot about the state of politics, both at the hyper-local level, the state level, and the federal level. And with another lawmaker quitting the state legislature before the session starts next month, and Colorado primary ballot facing all the legal stuff we've been talking about, and because it's almost Christmas, I want the panel to tell us something that you're wishing for or hoping for Colorado. Chris, what would be your Christmas wish for Colorado?
Well, my Christmas wish may not be popular, but I want a white Christmas with lots of snow, and I want the snow to continue all winter. And before anyone uggs, because I know people travel over the Christmas holiday, it is so vitally important, not only to Colorado, but to the nation, because the snow leads to snowpack, and the snowpack leads to water. Colorado's snowpack, I checked it this morning, is only 73% of median. That's the midpoint between the highs and the lows historically, and we're 73%. I went home to Gunnison County this weekend, was up in Crested Butte, and the streets were not busy because there's hardly any snow there. Now, Crested Butte Mountain Resort makes snow, but there's nothing like having that fresh, natural powder. It's vital to the ski industry that we get snow. Equally, the water is important to sit up on that mountains until the spring, and then it comes down into the streams and the rivers of Colorado, feeding fields, and quite frankly, it comes back to the city dwellers. So it's not just for the ranchers and the cows, it ends up coming back to us. So I want a white Christmas, and I want a very snowy winter.
Okay, Patty, your wish.
Well, I'll go for the snowy winter, maybe above 5,400 feet. But I'm going to extend on what Chris said. How about a very smooth DIA experience over the holidays? If you remember last year where Southwest was in so much trouble, they just had to make a $140 million settlement. You had people who never got out of the airport, who never got into the airport. Let's hope it is smooth sailing. And I'm going to add to that wish by saying, maybe they can finish construction early.
Well, that would be nice. That would be a huge wish. David?
Well, that's very hardcore, Patty, to go on the record at wishing for two miracles. And so if that happens, good for you. My family's been involved in the Colorado General Assembly since the late 1950s. And the atmosphere, of course, there's always partisan divides and heated arguments, all that. But the atmosphere in this last session was toxic in an unprecedented way. And so my wish is the over 90% of decent legislators in both parties find a way to get together and address the very serious and poisonous atmosphere that's being created by several toxic narcissists.
I think with the year that lies ahead and what's in store, we're all going to need some diversions. And so how about we jump forward to June of this coming year, and on successive nights at Ball Arena, which I still refer to as the Pepsi Center, the Nuggets repeat as NBA champs, and the Avs hoist the Stanley Cup for the second time in 3 years.
All right, now it's time for our panel to share a high and low of this week. And we will start with a disappointment because we have to end on a positive note, Patty.
What happened to America's mayor, Rudy Giuliani, just declared bankruptcy? But even before that, so which means the people who, of course, had a civil judgment against him in Atlanta will never see money. But the insults and the threats that we are seeing now across the country, the threats that have hit Krista, that are coming to the Colorado Supreme Court, Giuliani encouraged those kinds of threats to people who simply wanted to see the political process go smoothly. And with the lies and the conspiracy theories he spread, he has created a horrible situation.
On Saturday, there were bomb threats against Jewish community centers all over the United States, including the Boulder Jewish Community Center. The Boulder Police Department said we're going to do a serious investigation of this, and Attorney General Phil Weiser sent out a tweet saying good for the Boulder Police Department to do an investigation. Representative Elizabeth Epps said that Phil Weiser's rhetoric exploits pain, weaponizes fear, and doubles down on racist policing. And of course, we don't even know the race or any conditions about whoever did this.
I'm going to go back to the sports world for my disgrace. The NFL this weekend, their schedule, out of 16 games, 10 of them will be on Sunday, Christmas Eve, including the Broncos, our Denver Broncos, playing Sunday night at Mile High Stadium, or whatever it's called these days, on Christmas Eve, and then 3 more NFL games on Monday. Why isn't the whole schedule this Saturday? On top of the brutality and head injuries of this sport, we now have sacrilege.
Okay, Chris.
Mine's a little lighter hearted. My disgrace of the week is my Christmas tree that I purchased after Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, as is my tradition. And it's so dry, despite watering, that a lot of the needles have fallen off, and it's basically sticks holding up ornaments now. I do know that the drought hasn't impacted Christmas trees. I don't know if it impacted my Christmas tree per se, or if it was just an older Christmas tree, but that's what's happened.
I think you should take this row of tinsel and just decorate your tree when you go home.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. Let's end on something bright. Mary, Patty.
Well, this isn't so merry, but for 30 years, Colorado Springs had a great independent newspaper, the Colorado Springs Independent Weekly. It has just ceased publication for January with hopes of coming back, but a 30-year legacy, really important to have that alternative voice. So if you're in Colorado Springs, support it.
Okay. All right.
The Colorado School of Mines Ore Diggers, their football team in NCAA Division II for the second year in a row, went to the national championship game. They didn't prevail, but once again, they're the second best Division II football program in the country. And their quarterback, John Machota, computer science major, set an all-time NCAA record at every level for most touchdowns scored by a quarterback in a career.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Good. Thank you.
Very cool. We talk about legislative excesses and legislative bad actors on both the right and the left. How about a very solid legislator, and that is Colorado's Michael Bennet, and particularly what he has done of late in terms of being a champion for funding Ukraine. There have been stories out there, including one today in the Washington Post, about his personal family history, of his ancestors escaping from the Ukraine, and a wing of the family also from Poland. It is worth reading, but above all else, Michael Bennet is putting this issue front and center of how we are abandoning Ukraine and leaving it to Putin and his tyrants.
Chris?
Well, mine is Arc Thrift Stores because I was commanded to get an ugly sweater for this broadcast from Kyle and all the producers and Patty. Patty leaned on me too. So I got this at Arc Thrift Stores, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So shout out to Lloyd Lewis and his crew. They do amazing work with disabled people, and you can get a great deal there. So if he's not watching, blow up his phone. But I love my sweater.
And
so.
you look great in it. It's perfect. So for my positive this week is the family took the trip downtown to the Chris Kindle Market. Wow, it is better than ever. Well done, Denver. The vibe is so celebratory. There are really nice high-quality vendors, delicious food, lots of drinks. Tomorrow, Saturday, is the last day for this year's market. So get down there if you haven't been. And to close out the season, the Denver Brass Band is playing tomorrow, 4:30 to 6:30. And then how appropriate, an Papa polka band will end the night. So grab your family, and it's free to get in right there in Civic Center Park. You guys have mugs. They're really cute little mugs this year, and yeah, get down there. Thank you, panel, for coming in. A lot to talk about this week, and thank you all for joining us with your family watching this weekend from home or listening to our podcast. We wish you a Merry Christmas, and we will see you next week for our last show of 2023.